Hello everyone, I'm CrypticFox, and today we're talking about how to start a colony in oxygen not included after the Outbreak Upgrade. The first decision you'll make that will impact the early development of your colony are the duplicants that you're going to have in it. You start off with a selection of 3, and you have the ability to click on the shuffle and change any one of the duplicants as many times as you like to try to find a selection of traits that you find favorable. There are 3 different features to be aware of for each of the different duplicants: the attributes, the traits, and then the additional information that you need to be aware of also. Under the attributes, you have a list of the different skills that the duplicant is going to have. Anything that's in green and has a number associated with it is going to have a slight benefit to it. So, for example, this duplicant has a +4 in athletics, so they have a 40% higher movement speed than a duplicant who might be at 0. If they have a negative trait up here, it'll have a negative number next to it. For example, if they have something like noodle arms, they might have a lower strength, which gives them a lower carrying weight and lower potential for combat. Generally, when I'm selecting duplicants, I try to pay attention to a couple of different attributes that have a bigger impact on the early part of the game. The first one is the learning attribute. It impacts how quickly you can do research. So this duplicant has a +9 in learning, which is an incredibly high number, giving them a +360% research speed. This is going to allow you to more quickly churn through research with your duplicants, meaning that you're going to spend less time allocating duplicants to doing that task, and then also allowing you to go through all the research tree much more quickly. The next one I try to pay attention to is creativity, because duplicants who have a high creativity are going to produce better pieces of artwork, and those better pieces of artwork will have a better impact on stress. So they'll also decorate at a higher speed. So for example, in this case, this duplicant has a +5 creativity. That gives them a +50% decorating speed, but also the artwork they produce is going to be of a higher tier of quality and has a higher stress impact. Outside of that, I generally just try to find another duplicant who doesn't have too many negative traits, or whose negative traits I can live with, and who doesn't have negative attributes, but has something else that might be positive. Outside of learning and creativity, the other trait that I tend to favor is digging speed, simply because it allows you to more quickly expand on your colony in the early part of the game when you've only got a couple of duplicants. When you have such a small number of duplicants, the amount of time they spend on any given task can impact how long or how well you can sort of advance your game. And if they can do it more quickly, that means you can allocate them to doing something else more quickly also. So generally I try to favor digging speed as digging as another favorable trait. So I will probably change this out on this duplicant before I move forward. Looking under the traits, you'll see there are green traits and red traits. The green traits are positive traits that'll give you some form of a benefit. The red traits are negative ones that'll give you some sort of an impairment. In this case, squeamish, for example, means that this person can't perform aid. So if the other 2 duplicants have become diseased or they're injured, this duplicant won't go to the medical table or the medical cot in order to provide treatment for them. There are 15 negative traits, and there are 15 positive traits that could come up for any given duplicant. Sometimes they'll have multiples of a positive or multiple negatives. You just kind of have to choose through the ones that you're most willing to live with. I tend to find that pacifist, for example, is not one that's a big impact to me, just as they can't perform combat, because I often try to keep the creatures that I find in the game alive anyway, so combat really is of no benefit. I generally turn it off for my duplicants. Consequently, having that as a negative trait is really no negative at all for me. In the additional section on the character sheet, you'll find Decor Expectations, Stress Response, and Food Quality. Decor Expectation and Food Quality will impact the rate at which the duplicant will acquire stress. A higher Decor Expectation will mean that they'll have to have a higher Decor rating in the areas that they're in order to not feel stressed by it. And the higher Food Quality ratings mean they want to eat food that's a little bit nicer than maybe mush bars or meal lice. And you'll have to try to get into more of the cooking station scenarios to try to manage that stress impact. Now, that being said, food quality doesn't seem to have a very high stress impact on the game, so maybe don't worry about that too much. However, in the early part of the game, when the duplicants are coming in, you'll find that most of them have a low food quality expectation anyway. Stress response tells you how they're going to respond when their stress gets high. There are 4 different types of stress responses you can have in the game currently. Ugly crier, which means that when they get overly stressed, they're going to break down and cry. This is the one that's probably the easiest to manage. It does stop them from working because they're busy crying, and they do radiate a negative decor effect around them when they finish crying because they get the whole puffy eye thing going on. It's just not good. But it's generally easy enough to manage. Stress responsive destructive means that when they get overly stressed, they're going to run around and they're going to break things, and they aren't going to do any repair jobs while they're doing it. Generally, they'll find a piece of equipment that might be integral to your colony, and they'll just go and smash it. Duplicants with a vomitor stress response will throw up on the spot, and that can often be a problem because it can contaminate your food supply, your water supply. And in particular, with the latest update, it's also a source of germs that you can have in your colony as well. The fourth stress response is the binge eater. This particular duplicant, when they get overly stressed, they'll run to your food stores and they'll sit down and just constantly eat the food, which means they can go through a very large number of calories in a very short amount of time. And you can go from a position of being well established with your food stores to have nothing at all, and that can be very dangerous for your colony. Generally, binge eaters are something that I try to avoid. The game begins with your 3 duplicants arriving at the printing pod in this very small space inside of some foreign asteroid or planet somewhere. Initially, you'll be provided with a container that has food in it, and these oxalite crystals will produce oxygen for you, so despite the name of the game, you actually don't need to worry about oxygen initially. And food you don't really have to worry about initially either, because 20,000 kilocalories will last 3 duplicants quite some time. They'll generally consume around 1,000 kilocalories per duplicant throughout the course of a day. First thing you really want to do is take stock of the environment. Look at what resources you have around you. So you can see there are a couple of pockets of water here. There's some algae in place. I have some raw metals on the one side of my colony that I can use to build things. We have some more water located up top, and there's actually some fairly significant pockets of algae here which can ultimately be used to produce oxygen, and also can be used to scrub carbon dioxide from the air when needed to. If you see these little bugs flying around, these are shine bugs. They don't have a negative effect. They actually have a positive effect. If you look at the decor rating in this area, this shine bug produces light at plus 15, and that will actually help with growing things like bristle blossoms. Although it doesn't help with mealwood, unfortunately. It does produce a positive decor effect for you, though. When you know where your water's located and other resources, the first thing you want to do is expand on your colony, and that's just done by digging, which is the only thing you can really do when you start the game off. I generally like to extend in a fair distance off to one side because you're going to need bathrooms. Of all the things that you might need to produce in the game, the very first thing that you're going to require is a place for your duplicants to use the facilities, because they simply will just pee on the floor if you don't get something built for them. And that can be a problem both in terms of creating mess, but also because it creates a scenario where you add germs into the environment, where this starting zone is initially sterile. In the top left corner, you can see your population. In this case, you start with 3 duplicants. As you add duplicants, this number will increase. The stress level of the duplicants that are located in your colony. In this case, the stress is fairly low. You don't generally have to worry about stress until it starts getting higher than maybe 50%. And they'll generally regulate as long as you give them an environment that has nice decor and enough of the resources like oxygen and food and that sort of thing. Immune systems show you how the duplicates are faring against the battle against the germs. When they're ingesting germs either through breathing them or through eating them, it's going to gradually impair their immune system. And as that immune system goes down, they'll be more susceptible to becoming sick. When the immune system gets down to 0, they'll become sick, and you have to try to manage it at that point. And then this last indicator shows you the number of kilocalories that you have stored. Having created a space that we can expand our colony out, I generally want to replace the dirt here with tile because it creates a surface that the duplicants can run more quickly on. And it also improves the decor. In this particular colony, I have water that's located above my starting area. And I want to be able to make use of it, but it's going to be very awkward to access it up here and make use. So I'm going to try and move that water down. In order to do that, I'm going to make sure that I leave a space here that I can access the lower area of my colony simply by digging down, so I can pass the water down and collect it in the same area where I have other water stores currently. Once you get to this point, you have an open space you want to work with, then it's best to produce a bathroom as soon as possible, because by the second cycle, they will simply just pee on the floor if you don't have something. In your plumbing, you'll find the outhouse, the liquid bottler, and the bottle emptier. The outhouse is your first priority. I generally build 2 of them for my starting duplicants. You could probably get by with only 1. However, I know I'm going to be adding additional duplicants, so I might as well plan for that in advance. And I usually leave a space of at least two tiles to the other side of the outhouse, where I know that I can place the composting once I've done that in the research. In addition to the outhouses, you want to manage the germs that you're going to encounter. And the first set of germs you have to deal with is food poisoning, which comes from the bathroom specifically. In the medicine tab, you'll find the wash basin. I generally try to place a wash basin for each of the different buildings that will be located to the one side in the bathroom. So one for each of the outhouses, and then ultimately when I have a compost pile here, I'll probably put down a 3rd wash basin as well. With your outhouses built, your duplicants will have a place to do their business, so you don't have to worry about them peeing on the floor. It's kind of important for them to wash their hands, though, so that they don't spread germs around. The outhouse and the compost pile are a source of food poisoning germs, and you don't want that to spread around in your colony and get into their food supply, so the wash basins come in handy in that you can set it up so that when they pass by the wash basin, they'll wash their hands and remove any germs. In the information overlay for the wash basin, you can set the direction, and this will determine which direction the duplicants will have to walk in order to stop and wash their hands. So with the arrow pointed to the right, anytime they're on the left side and they pass by the wash basin going towards the right, if they have any germs, they'll stop and wash their hands in order to make sure that they're clean. These wash basins, however, do require water, so initially you're not going to get any value out of placing them, except that once you have access to the water, they'll be able to wash their hands finally. I generally like to leave a space in between the outhouses and the wash basin, because in the future, when I'm completing research, I'll be able to put an air deodorizer in here, which will clean up polluted oxygen that will come from the outhouses and also from the compost pile. Remember as you're expanding that whenever you dig into another area, you're generally decreasing the concentration of gases that you'll have in your open space. So in here right now we have around 600 grams per tile, and as much as, over on this side, 1,700 grams per tile of oxygen. But as you dig in and expand, whatever gases are present in that area have to expand out into the areas that you open up as well. The larger area you open up initially for your colony, the greater the distribution of gases, which will mean that it'll be harder to maintain high concentrations of oxygen. Early in the development of your colony, it's a good idea to make sure that you're advancing a little bit more slowly, so you don't create a scenario where you distribute your oxygen in a way that it makes it too thin to be of use. With your bathroom facilities constructed, the next thing you're going to need is water. Not only because you need it for the wash basins in order to clean off the germs, but it's also used for things like research and for making food with the food musher if you ultimately have to use one. With the Outbreak update to the game, the only place your duplicants can get water is from a liquid bottler, and you'll need to build one of those. Simply place it over top of any water supply, and you'll see that the extension at the bottom of the liquid bottler will reach downward to whatever level the water is at. Now there is a range limit to how far this will extend. As you can see, it generally only goes down maybe 5 tiles or so. So just be conscious of that when you're placing it. In this case, I'm going to place my liquid bottler here, and now this is higher than what the level of water is. You could theoretically put it lower. However, I plan to take the water that's located up high in my colony and send it down low, which will make the water level down here higher. Now that duplicates have water, they're filling up the wash basin and they can clean their hands. You can see that any germs that might be present in your colony using the germ overlay. The outhouses, of course, have food poisoning germs on them, but now that we have a wash station for the duplicants who pass by, they can clean their hands and they hopefully won't carry too many of those germs out into the colony. In order to ensure that I have my water collected in the same space, I'm going to send a ladder straight upwards into the water supply that's located above here as well. And that will allow any water that's located in this pocket to drain straight down into the reservoir that I have at the bottom. The next priority should be around starting research. In your power overlay, you want to find a manual generator that you can place to produce some form of power. A tiny battery which lets you store some of the power that you produce, because you'll ultimately produce more power than is required by your research station. And then in the stations, you want to grab the research station and place that as well. All 3 of these will need to be connected by an electrical wire. As your colony is expanding out, you'll start to notice there are different biomes or environments that are located around your core biome. These purple biomes tend to be hotter, and you can find a variety of different resources here. As you can see, this side of the colony is significantly warmer than the core area that you're living in currently. But in here you can find things like metals. You can often find pockets of algae and pockets of coal, which can be very useful. You'll find chlorine gas, bleach stone, the pinch of pepper plants, and some hydrogen out in these areas as well. This environment is sterile from a germ perspective. You'll also find immediately around your colony the swamp biome, which contains a lot of things like clay, algae, and slime, as well as polluted oxygen, and you can find dust cap mushrooms that grow here that make a good food source. This environment is not germ neutral. This is where you'll find the slime lung, which can be particularly dangerous to handle. You want to make sure that if you finally get to the point where you're expanding into the swamp biomes, that you manage that accordingly and you move more slowly so that you don't risk contamination. There's no point early in the game to expanding quickly into the swamp biome, simply because you risk death of your duplicants much more readily by contracting slime lung. Cycle 3, you'll have your next duplicant that you can add. At this point, you don't have the option to change the stats of the duplicates you have. You just simply have to pick from the ones that are available. In this scenario, the one I'm going to favor most is probably digging, because we're going to be in the process of expanding our colony, and you can also help out with creativity when we get to the point of building some decor. So I'm going to choose this particular duplicate. Our research is ready to go, but we want to make sure that we're doing the fastest research possible. If you go into the jobs overlay, you can see the different jobs the duplicants can perform and who's allocated to what type of job. Anything that's colored more darkly is going to be a trait that you have higher points in. So if the trait box is white, for example, it's going to be a 0 skill level and they're going to get no particular benefit from doing it. But in research, in this case, for example, the duplicate I called Cat in the Hat has a learning of 9, and that's the person I want to do the research because they have a 360% bonus to have the speed at which they do research, so they can complete it very quickly. So I'm going to turn the job off for all duplicants except for that one, and I'm going to set it so any new duplicants that arrive won't have that as a primary job trait. In your research station, if you click on research, you have your research tree that gives you a choice of different things you can build. The first one I generally like to research is farming, simply because it gives me access to compost. It'll also give me access to algae terrariums if that's something that you like to make use of. So I'm going to choose that as my first choice. We dug into the water reservoir up top, and that's drained effectively down into the lower area. Sometimes, if you don't build little sleeves down here for the water to pass through, you can get a bit of an overflow into the different areas, so I've unfortunately washed the floor inside my colony here a bit. It's not good for stress, and ultimately kind of wastes the water a little bit. However, it can be bottled up so that you don't ultimately lose the water entirely. You can just do that by mopping. Once you have your research started, it's going to be important to start to store some of the materials that are on the floor because any kind of dirty environment adds to a negative decor effect. If you click on your decor overlay, you can see wherever there are pieces of material just sitting on the ground, it adds a negative decor, and that's not good for your duplicants in the long term. In this colony, I'm going to store my resources off to the right-hand side of the colony. This will keep them out of the way of the core area, and also allow me later to isolate my storage compartments so that I can try to control any germs we might be getting from the outside environment. Once your storage containers are built, you want to set the resources you'll store in them. Generally, I choose all initially, but I don't want to store any polluted dirt in here because it will move polluted oxygen into this space. So if you click the organic drop-down and uncheck polluted dirt, this will prevent you from storing polluted dirt inside the containers and polluting the air that's around them. Once you have the settings chosen on these, you can choose Copy Settings and simply copy those over all storage containers that might be in the area. Our first level of research is complete, so we're going to want to move on and do another layer of research. At this point, you have there are 4 different options you can pick from because we don't have a supercomputer built just yet. My primary concerns early in the game are going to be around the movement of gases within the base, as well as the interior decor so that you can keep your duplicants happy. I would generally choose one of those 2 as your next research. In this case, I'm going to choose gas piping because I want access to the airflow tile that will let me build floors that will let gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide pass through them. As I've expanded this particular colony, you can see that the gases in the oxygen overlay have spread out significantly, and our oxygen concentration has dropped fairly considerably. As we dig out, we create a vacuum that then has to be filled by the gases that are in there, and our oxygen is spread out a fair amount, and the concentrations are getting low, and you can see in the red areas that we're starting to get some CO2 buildup. Don't worry about the CO2 initially, beyond the point that you want to keep the CO2 compressed away from the core part of your colony. CO2 is heavier than oxygen, so it will fall below any oxygen layer you'll have in your colony, and you don't really have to worry about cleaning it up initially, as long as you keep your oxygen concentrations high in the core part of your colony. To do this, you're going to want to access, in the oxygen overlay, the algae deoxidizer. You can also make use of the algae terrarium, which many people like to do to try to clean up the carbon dioxide and produce oxygen at the same time. But for my purposes, I generally just like to produce the oxygen quickly through the algae deoxidizer and keep the core pressure high in the main part of my colony, which will suppress the carbon dioxide in the lower part of the colony without having to bother to clean it up. This, of course, will require power, so we're going to connect this to our same little grid. You can help control the gas pressure within your colony also by blocking off areas that you don't necessarily need. For example, there's oxygen in this upper portion of the colony where I dug into the water reserve, but I don't really need this yet, and I don't want to have my oxygen pressure move up the ladder into this space either. In the very first base tab, you'll have access to the manual airlock, and I'm going to place one of these horizontally in this space in order to block off the upper regions of this colony and prevent them from oxygenating spaces we don't require. When you have your piece, it will initially be vertical, but if you hit the letter O, you can change it so it goes horizontal. Initially, you might find that the stress of your duplicants will start to rise at this point. This is largely because there's a mess on the floor, more so than anything else. If you can get your duplicants to clean up the mess that they have on the ground, you'll notice that their stress will recover rather quickly. You can simply do that by choosing the sweep function and then have them sweep up the core areas of the base. While nobody really likes to clean up, it ultimately makes them happier in the long run. My research is completed and I have access to the airflow tiles, so I'm going to build some of those in the core part of the base also to help ensure that there's good gas movement throughout the colony. These airflow tiles will allow gases like CO2 and oxygen to pass through them, but they won't allow liquids to pass through or solids. So you can use these to ensure that you can have good airflow for oxygen to spread through your colony, and also give a place for the CO2 to drop below the main level. Research is going quickly. We're going to move on and tackle interior decor, which will help our duplicants be happier with the general living space. Now that our farming research is complete, we have access to the compost pile, so I generally like to place that to the left of the outhouses. With the Outbreak update, anytime there's a spill that needs cleaning up, the duplicants no longer just destroy the liquids. Instead, they bottle it, and you need a place to get rid of those. This is where the bottle emptier comes in handy. So we're going to build one down here in order to dump clean water down into our water reservoir. It's cycle 6 now, and because we haven't been producing any food, we're going to be in a place where we're starting to run low on food. Initially, we're going to build a micro musher and place it on our main level. However, the long-term strategy is not to use this for the long term, because we're going to be creating mush bars, which are generally not a good source of food for the duplicants. We'll give them kilocalories, but not really good nutrition. Another round of research is complete, and now I'm going to move on to liquid piping, because I want to get access to sanitation, where I can make the deodorizers to clean up polluted oxygen. This also has direct access to percolation, which lets us clean up carbon dioxide and produce oxygen using the electrolyzer, as well as advanced filtration. In the core part of my colony here, I have a couple of hatches that cropped up while we were digging. Now, you could choose to destroy these and they'll provide you with food. That could come in handy, I guess, when my food is low. However, in the longer term in the game, the hatches will eat any kind of substance other than coal, and they'll poop out coal, which gives you a good supply of additional fuel that you can use in power generation. So generally, I don't like to kill these. Instead, what I want to do is try to trap them. In order to trap them, all I really have to do is dig away the floor and have some dirt located underneath that they can drop down into. Now, if that doesn't work, you can also try using a pneumatic door to try to catch them. But in this scenario, this worked out perfectly well, and now I can keep these hatches hopefully on the second layer of my base, where I can have more controlled use of them, but they won't necessarily be trying to eat the food from my micro musher. Cycle 8 now, and I've managed to expand the base a little bit more. As you can see in our oxygen overlay, oxygen concentration is not too bad. It's definitely higher on the right side of the colony, because that's where I have my algae deoxidizer. Ultimately, if I want to distribute the oxygen a little bit more evenly, I can place a second deoxidizer on this side of the colony. However, I'm not worried about it at the moment, because they have a place they can go to get clean air. And you can also see that our carbon dioxide is trapped at the lower part of the colony, where it's out of the way and won't cause any issues. Now I think it's that point where, as we're moving into cycle 9, I think I'd really like to give these guys someplace they can sleep that will help manage their stress a little bit better. As you can see, they're at 42%. I want to get that lower. And the first way you can do that is by giving them cots to sleep in so they have some actual furniture. I'm going to build a total of 6 cots because that's how many duplicants I expect to have in the early term. But we also want to raise the decor rating in this area, and that's where the decor heading comes in handy. Sculpture blocks are blocks of marble that you can place down. And actually, in this case, I'm building them out of sandstone. I think I'd rather place these out of granite. So we're gonna make some granite statues here. And when these ultimately get carved out, they'll help to raise the decor in the area. We can also add blank canvases to paint pictures. Generally, the more pieces of artwork you have in your colony, the happier your duplicants will be with the space. Cycle 9, we get our next duplicant. This is duplicant number 5. Again, we're going to choose a duplicant that has better traits. This one's a loud sleeper. I try to avoid those because they disturb the sleep of the other duplicants. Even though they have 2 beneficial traits, the loud sleeper is one that I just don't like to deal with. You have to give them sleeping quarters that are separate from everyone else. It can be kind of a pain. Non-constructed means that this duplicant won't build. And slow learner means this duplicant won't learn, but they're an interior decorator, so they can help with creativity, and I already have some people that are focused on learning. So I'm going to choose Gossman as my next duplicant. As we're building art, we want to make sure that we have the right people focused on the art. So again, in the jobs, we'll look at the people who have high art ratings. 5 is about the highest we have right now, so I'm going to take anyone who has a 5 and allow them to work on art pieces. As they complete more artwork, their skill level will go up, and they'll start to produce masterpieces, which have the best stress effect. We also have room for more research. So in the research section, I'm going to complete my research in the lowest tier by doing the power regulation. I do want to have access to the next tiers of research as well, so it's time to start building a supercomputer, which will give me access to those. With your bottle emptier constructed, you need to set what type of liquid is going to be dumped out in that space. You have two options, either polluted water or just regular water. In this case, I have my water bottler on my clean water supply, so the only thing I want dumped out here is clean water. Duplicates will now take any bottles of water they might have and bring them down to the bottle emptier, and they'll place them on here in order to dump the water into the space. We finished all the lower tier research at this point. It's now closing on the end of cycle 9 and into cycle 10. And at this point, you can pretty much research anything that might suit your fancy based on what you want to look for. In this case, I'm going to go after sanitation myself because I like having access to some of these bathroom facilities, and most importantly, the deodorizer, which lets me clean up polluted oxygen. The order in which you research these, it ultimately doesn't really matter as long as it fits your playstyle. Just cleaning up your colony can go a long way to helping with the general decor. As you can see, now that we've cleaned up most of the mess on the floor, the decor in this area isn't red anymore, it's largely green. And as we complete the artwork that's in there, it will get significantly better as well. Our stress did get a little bit high as I had to clean up a bit of a mess when the toilets unfortunately didn't get cleaned because I was prioritizing other things. So be careful how you're using priority in the game as well. When you set priorities, you tell your duplicants to focus on those things in favor of others. And some of the common tasks that you might expect they'll do just to maintain your colony, they'll often get overlooked because they'll be focused on different things. Sleeping in an area, though, that has positive decor will go a long way to reducing stress, and it's generally one of the fastest ways to reduce it. You may need to do some additional stress relief as your colony grows. So in the furniture section, they also have access to the massage table that you can place. So we'll put one of those down and connect it to the power supply so that our duplicants have some form of an outlet that they can use to manage their stress if they need to. Cycle 12 now, when this one little algae oxidizer is not really producing enough oxygen to supply the whole colony. As you can see, our CO2 has built up a bit on this side. So I'm building a second algae deoxidizer to add oxygen pressure to this side of the colony. We also have our 6th duplicant arriving. Again, slow learner is not really an issue for me. Germ resistance is very helpful, and strength helps them have a higher carry weight. So I think I'm gonna bring in our bodybuilder this time. We have a bit of a mess in the bathroom that somebody peed on the floor when the toilets were out of order, and we need to clean that up. But when you mop up the polluted water now, it doesn't just destroy it. You get these little bottles of polluted water instead. And those need to be disposed of in the same way that the clean bottles of water do. Only these polluted water bottles will also produce polluted oxygen, and that's a bit of a challenge because it creates an environment in which germs can spread, and that's not really what we want. We need to isolate where we dispose of this polluted water, though, because it's going to be full of germs. And ultimately, this germ water we don't want around the core part of our colony. In order to manage that, I'm going to build a space on the side over here that we can use to manage these germs. I'm going to dump the polluted water into the space that's over here in the purple biome, which tends to be hotter than the core biome is. The benefit to doing this is that we can isolate the polluted water that has germs in it away from any other water source. But this biome is also hotter than the core biome is. And while it's not necessarily hot enough to fully sterilize the germs that might be in the liquid, it will actually gradually create an environment where the germs will decrease in the polluted water instead of increasing all the time. This room I want to have blocked off with a manual airlock. I'm going to create a space that will leave me room to build another compost in here in order to manage our outhouses, and also room to have another air deodorizer. Inside this room is where we're ultimately going to place our bottle emptier, which is available in the plumbing area, in the plumbing section. The bottle emptier is one of the buildings that you can rotate by pressing O, and it will change the direction that the output will be placed on. So I'm going to place this against the wall, and we'll have a dump on this side of things. I do want to move away from using the micro musher to create mush bars, and that's where farming will come in handy. Now, they have had a significant change in the farming for this game, so I'm probably just going to focus on using planter boxes for the most part, because it allows me to place it on gas permeable tile. I'm going to start off with 15 of these farm boxes, and I'm going to leave a gap in between each of them so I can place in some artwork in here to try to manage the decor in here as well. Our research is complete. We have access to the air deodorizer, so in the oxygen, I'm going to choose the deodorizer and place it over here in the bathroom so we can clean up some of that smell. For the most part, this will generally be where most of my polluted oxygen lives in this part of the game. We finished our little chamber here to empty out our polluted water, so you're going to choose the bottle emptier that's in here, and under liquid, you want to select polluted water, and this is now where they'll dump out any bottles of polluted water. This is going to come in very handy because as these wash basins fill up with polluted water that's full of germs, they need a place to get rid of it. So So this being placed to the left of where I have my bathrooms will keep it in a hot biome where the germs might hopefully die off a little bit more easily. We'll also try to keep most of all the germs contained in the same area for food poisoning. We have our farm basis built down below here, so I'm going to plant some seeds. Mealwood produces a pretty good source of food, is easy to grow, and also has a 33% chance of producing a seed, which means that you can generally keep replanting it over and over again as you harvest it. It harvests 3 times before the plant is ultimately gone, and then at that point, you just have to replant it with a seed. Cycle 15 now. We have another duplicant coming in. I'm not worried about learning or at this stage of the game, so I'm going to focus probably on the duplicant over here that doesn't have to worry about learning. Cycle 15 is coming to a close, and at this stage of the game, our colony is pretty stable. As you can see, we have a good supply of oxygen in the colony. It's not really high concentration, however, over time this will continue to build as we continue to produce more with our algae deoxidizer. Our CO2 is well managed. It's contained below our colony. Probably the next phase of what I'll do with this is hollow out some more space down here to allow for more carbon dioxide to be collected at the bottom and to make sure that these airflow tiles below here are getting the most use. We have a good supply of food at 22,151 calories, and we've also planted a mealwood farm which will grow and produce calories for us as well that we can then leverage going forward. We do have a storage space, although this is going to need to be expanded upon in the future. And ultimately, I'll probably want to have some sort of control mechanism here to keep germs under control in the storage area. However, for now, this gives us a place to clean up the floor and ensure our stress is low. And stress is low. It's currently at 0%. The duplicants have an area that's ultimately has a solid decor rating, so when they're in here, they're going to constantly be losing stress, so we don't have to worry about them having an issue that way. Their immune systems are in good shape at 100%. We have a place for them to go to the bathroom and clean up their hands when they leave that area so that we try to minimize germ contamination in the remainder of the colony. We have an isolated area where they can dump out polluted water, and we can keep it trapped over there, both in terms of managing the polluted oxygen that will come from that, as well as the germs that will result as well. At this point, the colony is stable, and it's largely a point of maintenance and growth at this from here on out. You can continue to do some additional research, so you complete your research trees, and when those are finished, just destroy your research station and your supercomputer so that you're not taking up space, producing heat, or using unnecessary power. This is just one way you can set up a colony, and it's generally how I like to approach it. There are certainly many other ways. This game has infinite variety, so go and experiment and try it out a little bit yourself and see how you want to build. I do hope you find this tutorial helpful and that it helps you advance your colony and manage through the early part of the game without having as many challenges. I'm, as always, CrypticFox. I'll see all of you next time.